Hello, welcome to Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 4. This is a big scene. This is Shakespeare at his finest, right? Um, so that's why I kind of want you to take 2 days to go through this scene and process it. Read it a couple times. Pay attention to the wordplay and stuff because the words are everything in this scene. All right. We've got four main things happening in this scene. We have the introduction with Mercutio and Benvolio talking about Tybalt's message. We have Romeo showing up, and Romeo, Mercutio having their wordplay battle together. And then the nurse shows up a little bit later, and Mercutio and the nurse go at it with their wordplay. Mercutio and Benvolio leave, then it's Romeo and the nurse. We see her being all flustered because of the wordplay. And then we find out the plan for Romeo and Juliet's marriage. Okay, that's the scene in a nutshell. Let's break it down and look at it in more detail. And we start at the beginning with Tybalt's message. Benvolio and Mercutio have met. This is the morning after the party. The last time they saw Romeo was at the party when Romeo ditched them to go talk to Juliet. So Benvolio went to Romeo's house to talk to Romeo's dad, right? Talk to Romeo's man. Spoke with his father, and he wasn't there. But there was something at Romeo's house. There was a letter. How was it put? Tybalt, the kinsman of old Capulet, hath sent a letter to his father's house. That's what Benvolio says. So Tybalt sent a letter to Romeo. Tybalt was all ticked off at Romeo because of the party, right? And as soon as Mercutio hears that, he says, "A challenge on my life." Benvolio says that Romeo will answer it. And we have the beginning of our puns. The first one is, this letter is a challenge. It's challenging Romeo to a duel, is what it is. And Benvolio says Romeo will answer that challenge. He'll accept the duel. And Mercutio's like, well, any man will answer it if he can write a letter. So we have that duel going on there. And they start talking about Tybalt's prowess with a sword, how he's a good sword fighter. At one point, Mercutio says, poor Romeo, he's already dead. He's stabbed with a white wench's black eye. He's talking about Rosalind here. Okay. Mercutio knows about Rosalind and thinks that that wench is driving Romeo mad, as he put it. So he doesn't have some kind things to say about Rosalind for tormenting Romeo as such. They don't know about Juliet. And then Mercutio goes on to say, is he a man to encounter Tybalt? After he talked about how Romeo is all gaga over Rosalind and gone crazy, and he's not much of a man, so what kind of guy who's lovesick fight in a fight? And Benvolio asks that question, what is Tybalt? Is he a really good fighter? Mercutio says he is more than Prince of Cats. Now, this is an interesting allusion to a children's tale back in Shakespeare's day, and Tybalt was a prince of a bunch of cats in some children's story. So Mercutio is making fun of Tybalt's name. So he's more than just this prince of cats. He is a courageous captain of compliments. He's very nice. He's very proper, right? He sent a letter to Romeo challenging him to a duel. It's a very proper thing to do. He fights as using prick song. He keeps time, distance, and proportion. He fights like a musician, keeping time, a beat, keeping distance, so far from someone. He's a good swords fighter. He's like a musician playing a musical instrument. And then he goes on to talk more to Benvolio about how good he is, and he's keeping beat. 1, 2, 3 in your bosom, like he's playing with a sword, stabbing at him. And Mercutio is going into all of these sword fighting techniques to explain how good of a fighter Tybalt is. You've heard the expression, it takes one to know one. If that's true, Mercutio must be as good or better fighter than Tybalt to understand the things he does about Tybalt's sword fighting. Remember that later. Mercutio is just as good, if not better, than Tybalt in sword fighting. And then here comes Romeo. And as soon as Benvolio says that, the puns begin. And now it's Romeo and Mercutio and Benvolio on stage. And the first thing Mercutio says when Romeo shows up is, without his roe, like a dried herring. So here comes Romeo without the roe. It's like a fish. Okay? Roe is fish eggs. So we start having these goofy puns showing up. And he compliments Romeo on giving them the slip. Here is a French salutation for your French gesture. Gave us the counterfeit, gave us the slip. And so we have all sorts of interesting puns coming up. And Romeo asks him, well, what counterfeit did I give you? Mercutio's like, the slip? Can't you tell what I'm wanting to do here? I want to play a word game using puns. And Romeo says, oh, pardon, good Mercutio, my business was great, and such as minds may strain in courtesy. So here we have a nice little pun. Straining in courtesy, he should have told them what's going on. But to strain in a curtsy is what you would do if you're being courteous. So Romeo's like meaning to curtsy. So they start playing with these silly puns back and forth. And we've got pink, some pumps, some flowers. And we get into the wild goose chase. And that's all they're doing for 2 or 3 pages. They're just having fun with words. That's it. Okay? And Romeo's happy here. Now think for a second when I ask you this question. Why is Romeo happy? He's just got engaged, right? Just the night before, and now he's got a wedding date set for, we're going to find out, this afternoon. So he's met Juliet, he's going to marry her in less than 24 hours, and Romeo's happy. Everybody's going to be happy on their wedding day, right? So Romeo's happy. He is himself again. He is just as smart as Mercutio with the words. He's not being mopey and dour, and Benvolio likes this, right? Not Benvolio, Mercutio. Mercutio likes this. Well, Benny does too. And now art thou Romeo. Now art thou sociable. Okay? Romeo is himself again. So this is good, right? Romeo is out of his depression. He's out of his funk. And when they kind of slow down on their wordplay games, here comes the nurse. And the nurse shows up, and the first person to start making fun of the nurse is Benvolio. Romeo's like, oh, here's goodly gear. Here's someone who looks interesting. And Benvolio's like, a sail, making fun of the nurse. What's happening is she's pretending to be a lady, right? She's disguised herself. She's a messenger, so no one will recognize her. But she has a servant with her, Peter, the Capulet. He's probably wearing the Capulet colors. So they know they're Capulets. And Peter's usually shown following the nurse, holding up part of her dress, just so it doesn't get muddy in the streets or something. And when he's holding up that long train of the dress, Benvolio's right there. It's a sail. In other words, the nurse is a fat woman, kind of like a ship, right? And those are sails. So Benny starts making fun of her, and Mercutio follows right along with, oh, and he starts, thou desires me to stop on my tail of the hair. No, that's not right. Oh yeah, there's two, a shirt and a smock, right? So here we've got two people who are fools. And Mercutio goes up and starts making fun of them. The nurse asks for a fan, and Mercutio's like, good Peter, give her the fan to hide her face, for the fan is fairer of the two. Her face is so ugly she needs a fan to hide it, is what he's saying. So Benvolio starts making fun of the nurse in all these ways, and he's talking very eloquently, as he does. And the nurse is a commoner. She doesn't know how to speak eloquently. And so she's getting put down by this guy who's a smooth talker, and it's really frustrating her. For instance, the little dialogue exchange, she says, Gotti good morrow, gentlemen. And she's saying good morning. And Mercutio's like, Gotti good evening. In other words, good afternoon. Okay. And she's like, oh, is it so late? And he says something kind of inappropriate to her. It is no less, I tell you, for the body hand of the dial is now upon the prick of the noon. And it's like a sundial, right? And it's pointing up to the noon. But you can imagine all sorts of inappropriate words with the meaning of prick, right? And he's dancing around the nurse and probably, touching her inappropriately as he's doing this stuff. That's usually how it's shown on the stage. So Mercutio is badgering the nurse and making her upset, right? And she's like, out with you, what a man are you? Don't be saying stuff like this. And they banter her back and forth for a couple of pages. And then Mercutio even starts singing a song that's kind of inappropriate a little bit. And then he dances off. And Romeo's like, go ahead and go. I'll follow you. I want to talk to her. I'll be there in a bit, and we'll have dinner. And Mercutio dances away, making fun of the nurse. Farewell, lady, lady, lady. And it's now the nurse and Romeo. Oh, I didn't mention the malproposal. The nurse says she wants to talk to Romeo. And Benvolio says she will indict him to dinner. Now, what he probably should have said is she will invite him to dinner. But the word indict is very similar, has a totally different meaning. To be indicted means to be accused of a crime. This is not a good thing. So to have dinner with this lady is like a crime. Okay, so they're making fun of the nurse still. So he uses the word indict instead of invite to make fun of the nurse. It's called a malproposal. And Shakespeare does these all the time. So they all leave, and it's just the nurse and Romeo. And the nurse is like, holy cow, what a saucy merchant was this? Who was this guy? And Romeo's just like, it's just someone who likes to hear himself talk. And he doesn't have anything important to say. And she goes on, and she's like, oh, the way he was talking to me, oh, it was terrible. Peter, you should have helped me out. And Peter's like, sorry. He makes excuses. I didn't see anybody using yours for pleasure. Well, if there were some more friends around, I would have had my sword out, and I would have defended you. But he didn't. And the nurse goes on, is like, wow, before God, I'm so vexed. She's so uncomfortable. She's all worked up over Mercutio making fun of her. Now, the nurse is Juliet's messenger to come and get the news from Romeo. So Romeo wants to get this news to her. At one point, Romeo says, nurse, commend me to the lady, my mistress. I protest unto thee. And the nurse just kind of interrupts him, and it says, oh, okay, I will tell her. And she'll be joyful. But Romeo hasn't given the message yet. So the nurse is all out of whack here. But eventually, we get the plans. Romeo's like, what are you going to tell her? I haven't said anything yet. It's like, well, I will tell her that you protest. And Romeo's like, no. Bid her devise some means to come to shrift at Friar Lawrence. Shrift is another word for confession. Have her come to confession. Go to Friar Lawrence for confession this afternoon. And when she goes to Friar Lawrence's, I will be there and we'll get married. Okay? We'll be shrived. That's like going to confession. and wived. So she's not going to confession, she's going to get married. And then he gives the nurse some money. The nurse is like, no, I don't need a penny. Romeo's like, here, take it. So that's what you do if you're upper class. You give the lower class some coin for running errands. And she takes it, and the nurse says she'll be there. And Romeo has more plans. I'm going to go to the next slide here. These are the plans. So Juliet's supposed to go to confession, meet at Friar Lawrence's. They're going to get married there. As they're getting married, Romeo's servant is going to give the nurse a rope ladder. She's supposed to stay behind the abbey wall, and Romeo's servant will give her a ladder. The nurse is supposed to take this ladder to give it to Juliet. Then, at night, okay, this is tonight, this is the honeymoon night, Juliet will use that ladder and lower it down so Romeo can climb up into her bedroom window. That's their marriage plan, right? Juliet's going to lie and say she's going to confession. She's going to get married. She's going to go back with a rope ladder. No one knows that they're married yet. Romeo's going to sneak into a room tonight and then consummate the marriage probably for the honeymoon. That's the plan. What would you do differently? Feel free to send me an email. Let me know, right? Is this the way it should be? Is this the most romantic way you can think of to get married? Or is there another way you should go about this? Okay. Reread this scene again today. Listen to what I had to say about it. Look at your study guide questions. Okay. Do that today and tomorrow. And then the day after tomorrow, we'll go on with the next scene. Have a great day, and email me any questions or comments that you have.